Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. As always, I have with me two distinguished gentlemen, two gentlemen who are well versed in their arts and discipline. They are subject matter experts, Sri TV Mohandas Pai and Sri Sridhar Chityala. Mohandas Avare, Sridhar
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ
Avare, Namaskara and welcome
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ
to PGurus
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ
channel.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
Thank you, sirs, and thank you for setting aside valuable time from your busy schedule to talk about the economic situation that is going to come in a post-corona world. And we are going to have Sridhar start this discussion. As always, I'm going to mute myself, video and audio, and let these two distinguished gentlemen have a fireside chat. Over to you, Sridharji.
Thank you so much, Sri Ayarji. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. Thanks, Mohan. So looking forward to another
Thank you,
discussion.
Sridhar.
Thank
Look
you.
forward.
Look forward. Yeah. So I think one of the most fascinating topics today, which is raising lots of questions around data, as well as lots of questions around, what follows the COVID situation, which seems to have, plunged globe into a major crisis. So our objective is to share our thoughts and opinions, as well as what each of US and India, in terms of the path that they are pursuing to revive the economy, as well as to address and deal with the COVID scenario. As far as the US is concerned, to set the context, we are about 6.2 million people so far affected, and 187 to 190,000 deaths. But the acceleration of the COVID is coming down. From a peak 74,000, we are about 42,000. There is also a theory in the United States that we have this flu season that comes up. So there could be a resurgence post-flu season. So we got to be kind of prepared and deal with the situation as and how it evolves. So how did US address the two issues? I'll set the context, then I'll hand it over to Mohan, and then we'll continue. So we have had, after some hiccups, tremendous programs in terms of treating people, looking at preventive mechanisms, looking at testing mechanisms. India did play a great role when President Trump asked Prime Minister Modi to give us the hydroxychloroquine. India immediately provided the supply. India has also been helpful in the masks, which otherwise would have come from China, with the close partnership that India and United States enjoy. So we have seen to a great extent that the COVID issue being tackled. It's not been solved. It's now spread from New York into states of Florida, California, and Texas. Much of it is driven by still people not following the basic principles of discipline and being, preventative mechanisms such as masks, and so on. But the government has come up with a phenomenal program in terms of its stimulus, and it's targeted all sections of the society and injected in the first tranche $2 trillion, of which $500 billion went into the small medium sector, which employs a large number of people. So it addressed every area of economy which has been impacted, so that when things turn around, that there is a momentum back. We did have a contraction in economy in Q2, and myself and Mohan have been debating this in an alternate forum as to what exactly happened in Q2 and what the consequences are. Yes, we had an aberration. The economy was shut down, and we had, depending on the calibration of the number, it's between 32 to 34% only for that quarter, not for the year. 32 to 34% for the quarter. And so that is the implication, and that resulted in the economy being reclassified. And in the last reclassification, the forecast was around 9%. But since there is a possibility for the second stimulus, factoring in the third stimulus, second was $500 billion, again, additional to small business. And they expect recovery in Q3 and Q4 and normalization of the economy at -5 to -6%. So it's not kind of the world is a doom. So the revised forecast is -5 to -6%, and prediction of an upswing to 2.6% to 5%, depending on who you speak with, for 2021. So we'll discuss more of these programs, but this is the context in terms of the data and how United States is dealing with. Just today, we got the unemployment report. We had more than expected non-farm payrolls of 1.42 million, and unemployment came down to 8% from the high teens. So in macroeconomic and microeconomic indicators are good. The COVID situation seems to be in control. The fiscal program or the stimulus program is working. Contrary to the doomsday predictions, I think we seem to be getting back on track. So that's from a US point of view, Mohan.
Sridhar, let me give the Indian point of view. I think the total cases have gone up to 3.7 million, and the death rate is close to 70,000. Death rate per million is very, very low, one of the lowest in the world. Our death rate has come down now to 1.7%. I think 1.7% for the cases is quite low. And but our daily infection has gone up to 83,000. It's been going up. It's not coming down. It's been going up. India has opened up. The fourth lockdown has opened up. There's a fourth unlocking. People are going about the duty. There is indiscipline, and so it is spreading across. But the virality of the virus has come down because the death rate is down, and people are thinking that it's better to go out to work and earn a living rather than sit at home and do nothing and have no money to eat, no money for food. So I think people are very anxious. So you're going to see this increase, but with the low death rate, only 70,000 for about 3.7, 3.8 million people. People are now there is enough mask all around the place. The people have got all the ability to put it on. Recently, we saw a case in a village in Maharashtra where they had a religious feast and the whole village had to be shut down. So there is some indiscipline. People are getting complacent because it's been a long time since March that happened. Of course, the economic impact has not been very good. The GDP declined year on year in Q1 of our fiscal year, that is July, August, September, by 23.5%. This year on year, that's the only number we have got. That means our normal GDP last year was about $3 trillion. If you assume is equated on 750 billion, it came down 23.5%. Now that is because in the last quarter, the lockdown was very severe in the month of April. In April, Sridhar, for the first time in our history, not a single passenger car was sold. It was a very, very tight lockdown all across India because the Prime Minister did not want the virus to spread everywhere because we are not very sure how it's going to spread, how people are going to die, and what is going to happen. There was great fear which was generated by the global media all around, that this is going to be a pandemic, 300 million people are going to get infected, millions are going to die, blah, blah, blah. But all around India now, people are opening up. And in July, we have seen an upswing in the economy. We have seen railway freight actually increase in the last week of August compared to the same period last year. We have seen power come back to maybe 95%, dip down a bit. And just last week, I think power has slightly gone up compared to the same period last year. We have seen improvement in documentation for road transport. And we have seen last month in August, a year-on-year increase in the sale of cars and the sale of two-wheelers, which are indications of consumer goods. So this quarter, our GDP on a year-on-year basis may come down by maybe 9 to 10%. And we believe in the next quarter, that is October, November, December, we could be flat or we could be marginally down. And for the whole year, the initial forecast was India will be down by about 5%. Now people are saying it will be down by 8 to 10%. We don't know. But I do believe that we will be around 5 to 6% for the whole year, primarily because we are seeing increase, and the impact of government spending is going to come down. The government put in a $260 billion stimulus, but most of the stimulus, in terms of money going, was the poorest the poor.
Mm.
About 800 million people got free rations till November, I think. About 80 million women got free gas delivered to the house for about 6 months. And about 200 million women got money in the bank. 90 million farmers got some money in the bank. These are very large numbers, Sridhar.
These
Extremely
are.
large numbers. It happened because of technology. And government says that they're going to spend about maybe 35, $40 billion in giving cash out. The government put in a nearly $40 billion of loan guarantees for MSMEs, about $15 billion of farm gate investments to loans, and the government gave out Kisan credit cards or something like about $30 billion, $32 billion. So there has been a mix of loan guarantees, liquidity measures, and also giving money to the poorer class. The middle class has not got much. I don't think they got anything except a small tax break, which is irrelevant. And the industries which are impacted, like retail, like hospitality, like tourism, and like aviation, they've not got anything yet. And we believe
Mm.
that some more stimulus is going to come. The government has said a stimulus will come, and they want to wait for the impact to be seen before they give out more money. And our fiscal deficit this year is going to be very, very large. Last year, the total fiscal deficit for the state and the center could have been around 7%. And this year, we estimate it to be 11% of GDP. But
Yeah.
all the money will be borrowed internally. We don't borrow money from outside. Government's debt in dollars is about $100 billion for the economy of $3 trillion. And most of the debt is all internal rupees. Inflation is around 6%. I think it should come down. There's a problem of inflation because of supply issues. So we're seeing a gradual upswing. And the next year, we estimate GDP to grow in real terms by 5.5%, 6%, with inflation of 3.5%, 4%, maybe 10% nominal. So next year is expected to be a good year. It all depends on how we recover in October, November, December. So I think the fear is gone. People want to get back to life. And I think, we're still not past the peak of COVID. The numbers are still going up.
No, that's excellent context, Amon. See, one of the questions as a follow-on from what you just mentioned, most of the debt will be internal, and only $100 billion of US dollar denominated debt that seems to be sitting outside. If we take the deficit or stimulus funding in United States, it's the number can be $2.3 trillion to $3 trillion. So let's take it as 2.3 trillion, which is the official kind of number. And given the 10-year rates are at 70 basis points and 30-year rates are around 1.3, 1.4%, depending on how you look at it, given here in the United States that the Fed has announced till end of 2021, the interest rates will be kept to zero, given the scenario, economic scenario resulting from a pandemic. This is not an asset bubble, but it's a pandemic. The government has taken a wise decision of rebalancing its debt and reducing the cost of debt from about 3.2% of GDP to about 1.3% of GDP, and indicating that it should not be a burden to the economy and absorbed it as part of the total debt. Of course, as people would argue, Democrats versus Republicans, Republicans are supposed to be fiscally frugal. Rather than adding debt, it should come up from income that is generated or cut expenses. But you don't cut expenses, you don't raise income because there's no economic activity in a pandemic. So I believe they've chosen the wise model or wise method of adding the debt, which in overall scheme of things is to serve the nation, but at the same time released far more cash on the cost side by rehashing and rebalancing and refinancing the debt. I mean, I may be wrong, but I hear that the cost of internal borrowing is 7% in India, or 6% in India, or 7%, whosoever tells the number, Why is it that India is not willing to look outside and servicing this in a better manner?
Well, Sridhar, that is a big political question. Well, the average cost of government debt is 7%. That is on the stock. This year, right now, because the Reserve Bank of India reduced the repo rate, the lending is come down to 5.85. It went to 6.11. Now it's come to 5.85. I think it should come down more. But they say inflation is high for a very important reason. You must understand how we calculate our CPI inflation, which affects interest rates, Sridhar. We have a 46% weight for food. 46% weight for food. And, a large part of this food is vegetables like onions and tomatoes and potatoes, etc. And
Yeah.
tomatoes and onions swing very much. The prices go up 4x from maybe 20 rupees to 80 rupees to 100 rupees. And we had governments fall because the onion prices went up. So in India, we have a peculiar situation where onion and tomato prices determine interest rates, because these are based on very old weights. I think the weights are based on, 2004, if I'm right, 2004. The weights are 2004. They have not changed the weights. They're supposed to change the weights. But, we have a very moribund statistical organization which does not update. We are not up to date. Because today, by other surveys, the weight of food is only 30% for everybody. And frankly, Sridhar, food is not 46% for the top 500 million people in the country who are
Yeah.
consumers. The other 800 million people are marginal. And for them, whether onion prices goes up or not doesn't make any difference, because all of them get almost free food, free grains, and they live in rural areas where they grow whatever vegetables they want to eat. They don't go to the market. They do go to the market, but they can grow everything. If they don't eat onions for some time because the price have gone up, they're not going to, do anything else. So I think we still got this statistical problem, because India is a country with many countries in one, and we are trying to get one single figure of CPI for everybody, whereas everybody's income level is very, very different. So we have a high interest cost. And another thing, Sridhar, we have a large number of people who depend on bank interest for the living. The retired class and the senior citizen. We have possibly about 100 million senior citizens above the age of 60, and people who save money, because bank deposits in the country are close to maybe $2 trillion on a GDP of 3 trillion. And that's the highest quantum of money that in financial savings. Other savings are quite low, even though market capitalization is 2 trillion. Now must be maybe it's about 2 trillion now. Market capitalization is 2 trillion. A large part of it is held by so-called promoters and institutions, and individuals have only 20%. So only about 50 million people in this country own shares. So it's not very high, but the balance of 1.38 billion people don't own financial assets so much. Most of them have only bank deposits. So we have a problem. It's a very strange country if you look at economic data down the line. So the government is deciding to borrow locally, and there's not enough money savings in the country. The Reserve Bank of India worked on liquidity, and because of liquidity, they released something like $110 billion, $110 billion into the market, because they cut the cash reserve ratio and they gave some benefits to the banks. And that is not enough, because the total government borrowing this year could be something like about $170, $180 billion. So people are waiting for the Reserve Bank of India to monetize. That means the Reserve Bank of India will buy government bonds and release more money. They're doing that, and they already built up a little bit of stock. And I think that is what it is. But as to why they're not borrowing overseas, Nisha and I wrote articles way back that government of India should borrow at least $100 billion this year from overseas, because the interest rates are very low. And we have got $540 billion of exchange reserves, out of which gold may be $35 billion. So we had reserves of something like about $500 billion beginning of the year. Is gone up because money has come into the economy from overseas. About $35 billion of money has been raised. $35 billion, which is very large for India, has been raised to recapitalize the bank for the market. Reliance has raised about $15 billion, etc. So a lot of money has come in from outside, Sridhar, but government is reluctant to borrow we had advised that why don't they ask the public sector undertakings to borrow money? At least the public sector undertakings can go, they're quasi-sovereign. It will not be in the government balance sheet because they're one step removed, but they'll have the benefit of a sovereign rating. And they could possibly borrow at maybe 3% or 2.5%, because like you said, when money is cheap, go borrow and make sure that you use the money. And if the money is borrowed, they could sell to the RBI and take the rupees. And that could go into infrastructure. Government is spending money on infrastructure, but capital investment has come down. Consumption has come down. Consumption last quarter, consumption is going up, but capital investment is very, very down. Now we need to increase capital expenditure, and government is trying to do that, but the private sector is not biting because they got excess capacity. We got excess capacity in power. We got excess capacity in the airline industry, in the airports. We got it in the ports, and we got it in the roads. There's no money to invest because people are not investing because they're not getting returns on the road assets. So we've got some fundamental issues, but I think the good news is growth is coming back this quarter, and next quarter is going to be better. The economy is still in good shape. Our assets are fine, and the shift away from China is beginning to help. Just today, I read an article which said that the textile industry, which is possibly the second or third largest employer in India, is going to see a 25% increase in exports because the orders are coming from China. Many buyers in the US are trying to diversify sources. So we have to wait and see, but we're getting more optimistic as time goes by, even though COVID is not going.
Right. No, I think that's a great context in terms of the difference between the source of funds, from a stimulus point of view, and seeing whether you can benefit.
Sridhar, you can't compare us with the US because all you have to do is print those green pieces of paper, and the world will buy. If the world doesn't buy, the Federal Reserve will buy unlimited amount. It has expanded its balance sheet to what, $8-9 trillion now?
Yeah, $9 trillion, more than $9 trillion. Yeah.
Yeah, it can expand to $20 trillion and nothing will happen to you. So, you are in a favorable position. We are not like the US. Nobody wants to take a rupees outside India. It is a problem. Even the many Indians don't want the rupee, they want dollars.
No, I think you need to look at it both in the context of the size as well as the tools that's available. I mean, you don't normalize, but at the same time, you have aspirational desire to be a $5 and a $10 trillion economy. So you cannot be a $5 or a $10 trillion economy using the same old models that took you 70 years to get to $3 trillion, right? So therefore, some changes to come in terms of the mindset. The basic kind of principles of consumption, investments, exports effectively constitutes the economic outcome. Okay, so we all agree consumption was down, so that's why Q2 was impacted. In India's case, the investments went up. That's reflected in direct investments as well as in the reserves. And one of the great things that happened in the United States, and thanks to, again, President Trump, we found we had marginal increase in exports, but substantial decrease in the imports, almost close to minus 40% decrease in imports. So one of those things that showed the net increase in this Q2 economy is the exports, which is why it is minus 32%, or it may be minus 40 or minus 45%. So therefore, you can retool this and look at differently within the context of your own, Indian economic context, which is to say, how do I, as you said, leverage the reserves? Investments are coming in. Then how do you look at your imports and how do you offset and, the consumption, and whether you can have a better financing methods by which you can stimulate the consumption without overall impacting the cost side of the balance sheet. I think that's all my rationale was.
Look, let me give you our picture, Sridhar. In India's case, consumption is 70% of the GDP, and 30% is investment. Now the 70% has come down, and the 30% has come down too, because of that 30% investment. Household investment, I think, is about 17%, 15-16%, and that has come down. because real estate has come down, people are not buying property, etc. And as far as our export import is concerned, our total foreign trade has come down by about 35-40%. And the biggest impact there has been oil. Oil prices are down, right? In fact, you'll be surprised. I think in the month of May, we had a monthly surplus, a balance of trade surplus, which was not seen for many, many years because, all imports came down. And gold, we import about $35-40 billion of gold, and gold imports have come down.
We helped you, Mohan. We helped you. United States helped because we made, you started to export 43 billion barrels from 8 million barrels at a price which is far more competitive relative to what you were getting. So there was a trade substitution that occurred too.
India is importing from the US big oil, and I think it's very good. India should import more because WTI is cheaper. Of course, there's a freight element to be added, and I don't know whether it's sour or sweet or whatever it is used for the refinery. But Reliance can use any kind of oil because they got a complexity of 14 in there, which is very, very high in the refining. But whatever it is, our trade deficit has come down, and we have a current account surplus. But the balance of payment for the first quarter is a surplus because of capital flows and trade deficit going down dramatically compared to the same period last year. And for the rest of the year, we are expected to have a small trade deficit, hopefully, because we want more imports to grow the economy. And we're going to have a balance of, we're going to have a balance, the total balance is going to be in surplus because the capital flows are going to be in surplus. Of course, imports from China are coming down. I think imports in China are coming down by 25-30%. Last year, I think we imported something like about maybe $65-70 billion, and they exported only $15-16 billion because, the Chinese have a knack of shutting the market to others. I mean, the way they play down with America to make sure that they get the goodies from America, they don't open the market. They try to do it themselves. They shut it out. I still remember that Prime Minister Vajpayee went to them to talk about opening up the trade. Nothing happened even now. Of course, Prime Minister Modi is doing a lot by putting up tariffs and, doing many things else. And the local sentiment is against China because of the border issue. So I think the imports coming down from China and this for the whole year, because the mood is bad, and India becoming a exporter of mobile phones because, India has got a very good policy for manufacturing mobile phones. Last year, we manufactured nearly 250 million mobile phones. We actually exported about $5 or $6 billion of mobiles for the world. So after oil, you'll be surprised, Sridhar, our next big item of import has been electronics because we were the dumping ground for all the electronics coming from China because the Indians want the shiny devices, and the Chinese like Xiaomi and Oppo came and manufactured here, and imported here and put it down here. So this year, I think our trade is going to be overall down. The trade deficit will become smaller because of oil and less imports from China. And we're going to have a balance of payment surplus that will add to our reserves. But all this again shows that maybe the government of India to take some risk and go borrow 20-30-year loans from outside. Maybe go to Japan and borrow money because the Japanese government bonds are negative. They're giving, they can go possibly borrow 30-year money or 20-year money at maybe 2 to 3%, or talk to the Japanese government to promote Indian bonds in the Japanese markets because we're very close to Japan. Just yesterday, Japan announced they're going to incentivize Japanese companies to shift investment from China into Bangladesh and India. That earlier incentivized them to come back to Japan. Now they expanded that incentive they go to India or Bangladesh because the Japanese have become very careful. They don't want to be over-dependent on China, and they look at India very favorably. And if the Japanese money starts coming in, there'll be an enormous amount of money. And I think government and maybe the parastatals should go to the Tokyo market and borrow bonds, and then maybe go to the New York market. When your liquidity becomes so much, you will all, want some little bit of yield.
Right. No, that's great. So, in terms of just continuing the discussion on what exactly the mechanisms that is being put in place, from the perspective of the leap forward to 2021 and beyond. I know you have been talking a lot about using technology as the driving force behind the economic expansion post-COVID scenario relative to what has been done in the past. So I'll touch on the U.S. side after hearing from you on the Indian side, especially around the technology. I mean, technology is given here; it's endemic. If you look at all the tech companies, I mean, we have had a burst or a correction in the last 2 days. But if you look at every technology company here or technology-enabled company, be it Amazon, be it Google, be it Facebook, be it Tesla, be it Apple, be it online sales, either in Best Buy or Walmart or Amazon, the sales have gone skyrocketed. Anything from 60% to 200% increase in sale in the last quarter, now in the quarter that finished June 30th. So we haven't got we will soon get the September, but we will see a similar kind of an uptick. There's been a profound shift in as people adopted, and that's reflected in the numbers that we have seen. So technology in the United States, being the economy what it is fairly endemic. So we're still using the fiscal programs directed at specific segments of the industry. But you have been writing about the technology being a change factor or the game changer in terms of taking India forward.
Well, Sridhar, when you talk about technology, I'll give you some data. Last year, we exported $150 billion of services. We have 4.5 million people employed in software services. I'll come to products later. And you'll be happy to know that out of 6 million software engineers in the United States, 1 million are Indians. Out of the 4.5 million in India, 2 million work for American companies. Out of 8 million working for American companies worldwide, 3 million are Indians. So we are a large part of America. And of course, because of our hard work and the low prices we charge, we have reduced costs for the whole of corporate America and made many companies rich. All the companies you spoke about have the R&D in Bangalore. Bangalore has about 2 million people out of 11 million people population. 2 million work in technology. So we are a software service center that will grow. And this year they expect to grow maybe 9 to 11% from whatever indications are, because the spending has gone up. Now we have a very large startup ecosystem, 45,000 startups who created $170 billion of value, 40 unicorns. The last unicorn just last week was Farmeasy, which became a unicorn, and one more is on the way today. People say Una Academy could become a unicorn very soon, and we don't know it may happen next week. And we got $60 billion of capital coming in, but only 10% from India. The Chinese had put in money, about 8 to 10 billion, but Chinese won't be able to put in money because India has effectively stopped the Chinese investment coming into India. And we hope that by 2025, we'll have 100 unicorns creating $500 billion of value, employing 3.25 million people as against 750,000 people. But if you look at the impact of technology, as far as government services are concerned, Modi was able to transfer money to the poor electronically by DBT to very large numbers. Like I told you, about 345 million farmers and women got money. 345, more than the population of the United States, right? 800 million people got rations. Now the ration card has become portable. That means you can have a ration card in Delhi, come to Bangalore and take the ration from here, and it is portable. And Modi issued a Arogya Setu, a health app, which went up to 155 million users in 3 months and 50 million in 13 days. He broke the world record to go to 50 million because Pokemon with about 19 days, 18 or 19 days, was the world record holder. So electronics has done well, but the impact of COVID on the economy has been people's habits have changed. People in e-commerce, the business has gone up by 200, 300% in 4 months. In one of our companies called Licious, the deliveries have gone up 3x. And in education, Baiju got 13 million people to come on as against 3.5 million earlier. So if you look at payments, they've gone up to 1.6 billion payments in the month of August. The leapfrog. So all across India in payments, e-commerce. But the thing is, the base is small. Whereas for you, the base is much higher. For us, the base is small. But in the future, we're going to see more technology assimilation because the business models have changed. People want to connect to business and enterprises to technology.
Got it. Sorry. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Sri Ayarji.
I'll be very brief. We are 35 minutes into this conversation, and I want this to go for another 10 to 15 minutes. Viewers, you are sending in your questions. Please do so. We will take at most two or three questions because this is a very technical matter, and I want to give due time for our panelists to explain their point of view when they are answering their question. So, gentlemen, about 10 to 15 minutes more on your five-star discussion. After that, about 10 minutes of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Mohan, just to kind of get back to this point, see, notwithstanding the fact US is large in terms of the base, but the programs have been for the first time, and we have had a number of programs that did not produce what you call, in this instance, economic balancer rather than an economic multiplier. Because if we had truly shrunk from 21.43 trillion by 20-30%, the debt to GDP, the total debt to GDP for the first time is not only greater than 100%, but it's quite significant. So we're not going to grow at 8% like India or China. We are satisfied with a 4% growth on a large base. But the way this has been done is by directing money at specific segments of the economy. You said consumption. Consumption is, you said, vast number of people benefited by virtue of the social dividends that need to be paid because a large number of them are dependent. Same here. Everybody who paid taxes, got minimum $1,200 as a family, $2,400. If you had children below 17, for each child, $500. So everybody got for a period of 3 months, 4 months. Okay. Then on the unemployment side, then you had unemployment benefits of $600 over and about $200 to $500 each state pays. So everybody got their money. As far as the students are concerned, who used to generally repay their loans or interest, that segment of the economy was basically spared. So there is no interest and principal payments during that period of time. If you're having a mortgage or a rent, there's no foreclosures are being driven out during this particular phase, basically because you are allowed that grace period during the pandemic. If you're in the transportation industry, they got something close to $32 billion because the decline in traffic was anything from 70 to 85%. Then if you take the medical industry, they got about $117 billion so they can actually treat the patients. So, and then if you go into each segment, like, you can go into evacuation, people who needed to be around the world, they got. As far as the food stamps, people who are reliant on food stamps, they got about $450 million. So everything was targeted at specific segments of the economy, as well as, that is, this includes, then the $500 billion was not to large corporates, but to small and medium enterprises. And the first $500 billion went very quickly, and then the next $450 billion was released through the banking system. It was released through the banking system with 6 months from the time the loan is dispersed, no repayment, no interest, etc. So there was continuation of employment guaranteed and mandated for almost till 2024. For you, if you avail the benefit, you have to preserve 90% of employment going up to 2024. In some instances, they even extended it to September 2030. So which implied not only the austerity measures was addressed, but the continuity of the employment was preserved as a precondition for you to take the loan. When President Trump went up and said, please treat these as furloughs, which means people being temporarily laid off and brought back, you will see an aberration, but you will not see a complete contraction in employment. That's why we'll get back to this 4%, 5% unemployment levels that we have enjoyed. So the fiscal stimulus not only did not put a burden, but were targeted at the specific segments on a vastly large universe. And on the source of funds, I think we already addressed. So to me, I think if you, as you said, so technology is embedded in driving the transformation, and the enablement of benefits was also directed at those three segments because of consumption, investments, employment. Where there was no investment, employment was preserved through the austerity measures, and strategic management was done around the imports so that there was no kind of drain on the trade balance.
Well, Sridhar, that's very interesting. You are a rich country, $50,000 per capita income. We are a poor country, $2,000 per capita income. But what Modi San has done is he has taken care of the poor by giving them rations, giving them a little bit of money, etc. We had a migration from all the big cities. Maybe 10 million people migrated from the big cities to the villages, etc. And when they went back, he put money into public works to get them employed. He put money into work for the migrants in various districts where they came from. And he has also made sure that there was a moratorium on loan repayments and interest till August end, which just expired today. And we got to see what happens later. And the Reserve Bank is now talking to them many things. So we followed a different approach. We took care of the 60% the bottom. We have not done anything for industry. The middle class has not got much except a moratorium on payment of their EMI, etc. And we hope to have another stimulus. That's what government is telling us. Yes, Sri.
Mohandas, I have a question for you.
Yes,
One in
yes.
5 Indian today is a middle class person, and
Yeah.
and they also expected to be taken care of, because what happens is the poorest of the poor, they are thinking about what is next day's food, next day's clothing and things like that. The middle class is a little bit more nuanced. They are planning for their children's education, they are planning for their retirement and things like that. Somehow I feel a little rankle that the Modi government said the middle class is somehow going to take care of itself. I think the first few months the middle class has managed. I think it is high time that they have something very similar to what Sridharji mentioned. You need to put some money back in the pocket of every taxpayer. I'm saying very
Yeah.
clearly, taxpayer. And I think that is needed, in my opinion, sir. Please tell me what you think.
Sri, I totally agree with you. I written about it, tweeted and requested the Prime Minister do something for the taxpayers. The Prime Minister, of course, has praised the taxpayers and the farmers for paying taxes, and he said he will improve the services. But they're not. They got a very small tax break on some housing, which is not very relevant. They got this moratorium on the loans, but they're not got anything else. And I think they're very worried because the latest data says about 25 million people was the salaried class have lost their jobs. I don't think the data is right, but there have been large numbers of people who lost their jobs. In fact, just today, a friend of a person whom I know wrote me a very sad letter saying that they have no money to pay rent, etc. And we are hearing many, many horror stories. What Prime Minister has done is they said that if you are in formal employment for certain people below 15,000 rupees, they will pay the social security charges like ESI, PF for about 6 months, and they can also get money from them, which is very marginal, which is of not much utility, even though much money has gone out. In Indian terms, is quite a lot of money. Maybe the overall money that's gone out could be $5-7 billion. But government has not given them grants. Government has not helped the industry. They should have a tax break now. For example, the finance minister came out with a tax structure where she had 7 slabs instead of 3 slabs, which are earlier, to give some kind of relief. There is no relief because at the end of it, most people did not get anything. But maybe they should go back and make it 3 slabs and reduce their income tax burden at least for the salaried class, so that at least they have some little bit of money. We're hoping that the government will do it, and I do hope that people in government will look at this program and say we must do something for the middle class. And there's great disappointment all across India by the middle class. They're all keeping quiet, but they're very upset. I know they're very upset. They talk to me, and some of them are very, very angry that nothing has happened to them. They, of course, say that the bottom 60% should be first priority. They've been the first priority, and everybody supports that. And everybody, for example, Sri gave money to Akshay Patra to deliver free meals. Akshay Patra has delivered something like about 80 or 85 million meals. 85 million meals, the enormous amount of meals that have been delivered. So I think middle class is still not done anything, and taxpayers have got almost nothing.
Yeah. So, Mohan, just to on that point again, we have discussed this offline. Probably India must. I'm distant. I'm not close to the way the Indian economic system is managed. But you need a probably, you are a CFO, and you have managed the balance sheet of large corporation. So you probably require a balance sheet based approach in terms of addressing, rather than a fiscal, monetary, and social policy as the tool. Okay, a social policy means that you address this. A fiscal policy means, okay, you keep the interest rates toggled. The monetary policy, you keep the deficit on the fiscal side. On the monetary policy, you kind of, tweak the interest rates, and then you work out the borrowing and spending. So on the contrary, if you want to, what you call, Bodhiji calls a social dividend, should you be thinking about an alternate model of source of funding, which is, divesting, because India is an attractive destination today. If by my calculations, you're receiving something like 63, 64 billion dollars direct and indirect investment, and we saw FPI inflow of close to $7 billion by my calculation last month, in that is July, not August. So there is consistent pattern of funds coming in. So is there a differentiated approach that is required, given that you are already a significant issue around the technology, significant opportunity around technology?
2 points. We certainly need more capital because we have to spend more money on infrastructure. Prime Minister said we need he's got a 1.5 trillion spending program on infrastructure. That requires a lot of money. And the only way money can come for that magnitude is if you go and float 20, 30-year bonds outside. I mean, I've been writing along with Nisha that we need $100 billion a year or 20, 30-year bonds every year for the next 5 years, $500 billion to pump money into the economy and use it for infrastructure. And that will make India much more competitive because we have a need. And if you use local resources, interest rates will go up because we don't have enough capital for our local resources at all. And interest rates are very high. We need to create surplus money in the economy. So I think that is important. And I think that has not happened yet because, there is opposition to government borrowing overseas. We understand the political opposition because there is a set of people who say government should not borrow, they should not get exposed to dollars, something will happen. I've been telling them that if you borrow bonds outside and it lists outside, the money is not going to come back to India. And what government has done is that some of the government bonds have been made fully allowable for foreign investors, issued in India, and issued in India, and they're going to become part of some global indices, and they hope that people will come and buy those bonds. Yes, people have been buying the bonds, but what India requires is at least $100 billion a year. If government of India doesn't borrow, they must ask the parastatals, the financial institutions, to go borrow outside and get the money inside and float them as bonds and list them overseas, so that when you become a $5 trillion economy, maybe by 2026, because we are going to grow in the next 4 to 5 years, this money doesn't look very big. Because, like you said, if you got $100 billion in government account, there's nothing. If you borrow another $500 billion on a $5 trillion account, it hardly makes much difference because the cost of interest will be so low, it can easily be serviced. And when you have to pay the money back after 20, 30 years, India will be a $15, $20 trillion economy in 30 years. So the money will look very small. But I don't know, government has got its own myopic views. There are too many people, opinion makers there who don't want to do it. And they're very opposed to government borrowing bonds. I understand government borrowing bonds on its own name, but they can ask the parastatals to do it. They got the oil companies, they got the big financial institutions, and they got some of their big manufacturing companies. They can all go to borrow money in dollars at this point of time because, that money can come back to India. But then we got $540 billion of reserves. $540 billion. You've been saying, Sridhar, that $540 billion is nothing for a $5 trillion economy. You need at least about $750, $800 billion at that point of time. But they're still 5 years away because every time the reserves goes up, money is released into the local economy by the Reserve Bank of India, who buy the dollars and release rupees. And that increases liquidity. And they're scared if there's too much of money floating around, there'll be inflation. But today, there is demand destruction. There is no inflation because there's demand destruction. Inflation comes when there's excess demand. Excess demand pumped up by excess money. But money is in excess because liquidity is very large. Reserve Bank has got about $110 billion now in the money markets, which are floating around with the Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the demand has been suppressed. Now, demand can only come up if you spend money on infrastructure. And infrastructure requires large quantities of money to be spent. And the only big spender of infrastructure is going to be government. Because we need the roads, we need the ports, we need the railways. All that has to be done by the government because the public sector is very big. So I think India has to take some bold moves and understand that this is the best time to borrow overseas.
Yep, I agree. I think it's, I think all the economic fundamentals are in good spots. So I think you need some bold and disruptive measures in terms of moving to the next phase. Thanks, Mohan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mohandas ji Avre and Sridhar Avre. And my takeaway are two things. One is that the government should perhaps pay more attention to middle class, and that the government should try and get in about $100 billion, not maybe a government to government, but through some of the quasi public institutions. I think these are the big takeaways. I think we would like to not just pose questions and problem, but also give some suggestions for the government. And I know that the Prime Minister watches, or at least somebody from the PMO watches our hangouts. That is the whole intent and purpose of this. And I must thank both of you gentlemen for your mastery over numbers. Man, if somebody said information at your fingertips, you two are living proof of that. I mean, I'm saying this completely, I'm totally blown away. That's the only way I can tell you. I mean, I thought I was keeping up with my numbers when you were giving it, but this is something that for somebody who's seriously interested in finding out how economics work across countries, what has to be done for a particular country, how does it go and translate itself into a different country. This was a mastery discussion on that. I really, really thank you both for spending the time. I have a few questions from our listeners.
Yeah.
And each question I'd like both of you to answer. First, I'd like to go with our guest, Mohandas Pai Are, and then Sridharji, you can add or complement to that question, that answer. First question is from Bharat Ved Prakash. What is your opinion about investment by the Indian government in large infrastructure projects to stimulate the domestic economy?
I totally agree. We have to do that. And government has got a program of $1.5 trillion. Prime Minister approved a 105 or 120 lakh crore program, which is very large. But they have to fund the program. They have to give the orders out. The road minister is trying to do that. But I think we need to do that. And they got to find money for that, because if they release the orders, who's going to pay for it? And that's why instead of borrowing locally, they must go float bonds outside and then bring in the money here, put it in the reserves and take money from the Reserve Bank of India and pay it off. I totally agree. That's the only way to kickstart the economy and create demand.
Sridharji?
I think I'm in complete agreement, which is namely that the infrastructure is the one which creates jobs as well as it provides the fulcrum for it to be a 5 and a 10 trillion economy. I think both there are, at least from looking at from the market's point of view, Japan is interested, Singapore is interested, and UAE is interested. I won't be surprised if even United States, some of the large pension funds or fixed income funds are interested in a long-term play. There's clearly yield in that, and there's clear opportunity.
Next question is from Vatsal Mawani. China has recently invested in bio-warfare facilities in Pakistan. Maybe they want to test viruses on Pakistanis who are genetically similar to Indians. Can we expect more pandemics in India?
Well, I don't know. There's a hypothetical question, because I also read that news item, and to say that they should test it on Pakistan. Well, Pakistan, in fact, has become a colony of China. You all heard that when Pakistan ran out of dollars to buy oil, they went to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and both of them gave them $6 or $7 billion, right? Half of it is for buying oil on credit and half in cash. And now, when they turned against the Saudis because they went to Erdogan and were supporting Erdogan, and one of the ministers threatened Saudi Arabia that if they don't call the Organization of Islamic Countries for a meeting to condemn India on Kashmir, he is going to call them a separate meeting, and Prime Minister Imran Khan will do it. Very foolish statement to turn the Saudis. The Saudis show the displeasure by telling them to pay back the loans, and they borrowed 1 billion from China and paid back the Saudis. They borrowed from China. They don't know what the Chinese are going to do to them. The Chinese have built a highway across Kashmir which we claim as our land, which is held by Pakistan, and gone to Gwadar, warm water port. And in Gwadar, they're taking away land and trying to build their own city with the Chinese police and everything else. And many people in Pakistan are now saying that Pakistan has become the newest colony of China. China will give them more money and make sure they can't pay, and then China will take over the assets. The game plan of China is very clear, and these people are falling into the trap. So they may be trying something like that. I don't know. We have to wait for the US intelligence to come and tell us what to do, because I'm sure the US will have all the intelligence, knowing what the US does in terms of technology, to understand and let us know. But certainly, this is a very scary thing, that if it is true, it's a very, very scary thing, and India and the United States and the rest of the world has to wake up.
Sridharji?
No, I think I don't know about the Pakistan, but one thing is very clear. The COVID situation has opened the eyes of the world. And I believe that now the world as a whole is looking at China as a test lab based on what we have seen. So there is definitely a fear, because if you look at last 17 viruses, SARS, bird flu, H1N1, now the COVID, all seems to be going towards one common venue. So there is a fundamental fear as to, you are giving a lot of what I call as importance. This COVID is a failure on the US part, Mohan, right? COVID is a failure on the part of the US, not identifying what was going on in Wuhan, notwithstanding the fact some of the people involved may have been from United States. Okay, so we have a big issue on this virus situation and what is to come. I don't think we have seen the last of it. There's already, they're talking about something else, so therefore it's a problem, sir.
Thank you very much. This is the last question from Sukhad Shirkhetkar. The demand has shrunk. What should government do for raising the demand as purchasing power of people has reduced and savings are diminishing? Well, Mohandas ji, yours.
The two things only, like you said, like Sridhar said, put money into the hands of people. How can you do that? Send money to the bank accounts, like you did for the 200 million women, you did for the farmers, give it to the middle class. Because the middle class are the people who are going to spend money on the consumption, and you got to revive. The second thing is cut the income tax rates. You cut the income tax rate for the salaried class in a way which can be easily done, so they have more money. For those of them who still got their jobs, they'll have more money and they'll spend that money. Because it's really a bad situation. Many people are running out of savings. They're running out of savings. Some people have committed suicide because they have no money left, and many have lost their jobs. They don't know what to do, and I think it's a very serious issue. And that's why I think there's a very important question. I do hope the people in the government are listening to this. At least reduce the income tax for all the salaried classes up to 15 lakh rupees, so that people pay less and that money will be available to them. I don't know whether they want to give back a refund to all taxpayers. I've not got my refund. The finance minister said we're going to give refunds to everybody, to MS. I still not got my refund. They've been harassing me for 9 years. Every year I pay more tax for a refund because I think I don't want to pay tax at the end of the year. And every year I'm picked up for more and more questioning. And I've not got my refund for tax I paid 2 years ago.
Right. So to the way I would respond as far as the US is, I think is on the right track on the demand stimulation side. If I have to give my piece of, and then also on addressing the most important segment of the economy, which is the small business. The small business occupies almost close to 40 to 50% of the employable workforce in the United States, contributing to about 47% GDP, 47% of the GDP. And so therefore, this $500 billion initial plus the $450 billion augmentative has been directed with employment preserved till 24 or 30. So the next tranche, which is being conceived, either you call it as a skinned version, focuses on three important segments. One, again, is education for people going back to school. They need to be taken care. So school. The second, again, small business and the individual taxpayers as well as the unemployed. And obviously the third, which is the healthcare, the medical, the vaccines, and so on, because we need to be well prepared to treat once the vaccine is available. So they, I think, focusing on the right things, both on the demand, the jobs.
Sri, India has got a $40 billion loan guarantee program for MSMEs, $40 billion. And that's very large. They already given out maybe $20 billion so far, nearly $20 billion so far. And that is running well. That will stimulate some demand for MSMEs. But if MSMEs have to produce, people have to buy. The problem is consumer demand is down. But the good news is, Sri, the two-wheeler demand has gone up. They sold more two-wheelers in August than the year before. Car demand for cars has gone up. That could be suppressed demand, or there may be new demand coming up because people are going out. They don't want to use public transport. They're buying. And we heard that the demand for used cars and two-wheelers had gone up before the new cars were purchased. So we're seeing many things happening, but a large segment of the population, especially the middle class, has been deeply hurt, and they need something. What you're saying is right.
Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sridharji, your answer towards the end got lost a little bit because of technical challenges. So if you would like to finish your thought on what you are saying, sir, then we can bring this program to a close.
Got it. I think I just was indicating that there are four important drivers that the government is focusing on, which is very critical. First and foremost is the educations, people going back to school. They need to be taken care of. So there's a lot of funding that's directed at the schools. The second, the continuation of the unemployment as well as the economic benefit to the taxpayers. So they're continuing the program. So this is where demand will continue to be sustained and the employment will be preserved by virtue of those who are availing the program. The third program is directed at the SME, small medium enterprises. So they're going to have additional funding into that. And the last one is there is an inevitability of the COVID vaccine. So it has to be, the people have to be treated in a mass scale, which requires a special funding. So again, they have set aside money for that, the treatment of the COVID. So those are the four important pivots to which the money is directed: demand, employment, welfare, and health.
It was a fascinating discussion, slightly different viewpoints, but two largest democracies on the world discussing views and options. And I thought it was fantastic. And I wish both of you would come back and weigh in on substantive issues like we did today. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, Mohandas.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sridharji. And we'll be back again very, very soon. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar. Thanks, Mohan. Thanks, Sri.
Thanks. Bye.